Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 with Dr. Seth Kopald. On this episode, Seth tells us his own story of the connection he has with parenting, organizational leadership, and IFS. We talk a lot about IFS in the workplace, the importance of having voice in organizations so people feel safe to share their opinions, and then the people at the top can be curious leaders without the need to know all of the answers. Seth shares how leadership theory parallels self-leadership. It's really fascinating. He draws several parallels between leadership in the workplace and leadership at home. I don't know about you, but I never thought about parenting as leadership in the home, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Of course, we know, and Seth does a fantastic job of driving this point home, that in self, whether we're parents, bosses, employees, in self, we know what to do. In self, we have wisdom. In self, we have compassion. In self, we have clarity. In self, we do not abuse power, no matter what our position of power is, whether it's a position of power at home as a parent or a caregiver, or power at work. In self, I can see the whole parade. I have the whole picture. My parts, as amazing and creative and hardworking as they are short-sighted. In self, I see. I hope you enjoy this one.
So I would love to shift, because the other thing that you are into or known for, the other thing that's you're passionate about is IFS in the workplace and IFS in leadership. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that and how you came to be. So I know you taught at the Montessori school. So how did you come to like this other part?
Yeah. So my whole pathway to IFS and to all this is very non-traditional. So I started off, I was going to be a high school English teacher. I went to Michigan State. One of my high school English teachers kind of opened my awareness to the power of learning and how it makes me a better person to learn. And I really thought, I could do that for people. And then I did my student teaching and found, these kids are way too big for me and scary. So I ended up switching to early childhood, became a Montessorian. I was trained through AMI, which is Association Montessori International, which is the national accreditation started by Dr. Montessori herself. I later taught community college and early childhood development, because as a preschool teacher, you only make, I had a master's degree and I think I was making like $23,000 a year or something like that. I taught community college for a while, and then I found a lot of my teachers at the community college were Head Start teachers. And most of them were for teaching children from migrant farm worker families. After about 3 years, my daughter was born, and I was driving an hour to my work, and I realized I was losing not only my work hours, but I was losing 2 extra hours of her life. And it wasn't, I kind of started feeling this wasn't exactly the fit for me, like what I want to be doing. And the Head Start teachers asked me, they told me there was a director position open, and they asked me if I'd be willing to apply, because we liked each other. And so I approached an organization, ended up being, they wanted me more to help guide their whole education system throughout the state of Oregon. And so we did that, and we helped transform the organization. And then later I became a national consultant for Head Start. And when I got this role, part of my job, they said, not only will you help people with education, but you're supposed to help them with management systems. And I said, I don't know anything about management systems. Most people are out there just faking it. So I thought, well, I don't like doing things that I don't know. Like, I don't like faking it. My parts get to, like, I'm going to get caught. Like, this is not going to work. And I'm not going to be helpful, right? I also thought, well, I have a master's in education, I have a Montessori degree. If I don't, after this job, what am I going to do? Like, if I lose this job, like, how am I marketable? And I thought, well, since I need to help people with management systems, and I need to be more marketable someday, perhaps, why don't I go back to school? So I ended up finding a PhD program in organization management with a specialization in leadership. And little did I know, 4 or 5 years later, I'd find IFS, which is self-leadership. So that also all melds together. And my knowledge of Montessori, like child development and our young parts, that all melds together. So it really complements all the way around. And during my PhD program, I found myself drawn to literature around creating a safe place for voice in organizations, which means voice is defined like people giving improvement-oriented ideas, speaking up about what's happening in the organization, what should be better, what should be different. Some people consider that also whistleblowing, right? I'm not so much, that wasn't which is fine if you need to, but my whole thing was, I was really intrigued that a lot of the research shows that as you get higher and higher in leadership positions, like a CEO, they end up developing these defense mechanisms around having all the answers and being right, right? So like, I can't be wrong. I have to know everything. Like, I'm the leader. I have to, right? So like when you have a manager and they're supposed to know what to do, right? So we have these, what's called like an implicit theory. Like we have this theory, unconscious belief that we've learned this through time, that if I'm the manager, I'm supposed to know everything. And the higher you get, the more intense that is. Like, you can't be the CEO if you don't know things, right? Like, you have to know everything. So, but what that does is it creates parts inside of us that become very defensive to blocking anybody finding out that you don't know. And so you actually block key data for making organizational decisions that would help the organization thrive. So for instance, the people on the ground, they know what's happening. They see what's happening in the workforce. They see what's happening with the product. They see what's happening with the services. And if the leadership doesn't get that data, how are they going to make decisions for the organization? So typically what happens in a defensive mindset is that leaders block voice. So they often will, take away power. They'll often will, kind of tell you or listen to you, but then nothing ever changes. There's lots of great things you could read out there, like around learning organizations. Peter Senge wrote a lot about learning organizations. One of my favorite theorists is Chris Argyris from Harvard, I believe back mostly in the 60s or maybe 70s. And I think he kept writing into the 90s. But really talked about the difference between an organization that's willing essentially to be in self, where the leader will be curious about their own shortcomings, about their own lack of knowledge, and to be open to what other people can bring.
So you got a PhD in organizational leadership or organizational management, and then how did you end up with IFS?
Okay, so basically, they always warn you when you get into a graduate program that the divorce rate is really high. So whatever problems we had in our marriage must have been augmented by, me being in this program, working full time. Our son was just born, so we had an infant on board. I'm working full time, traveling for work and doing a PhD program. So I was not as available, even though I still, every night I was the one that put the kids to sleep. If they had an owie, I was the one to soothe them because I have all this experience around nurturing children. So as I was going through my divorce, especially at the very beginning, I had a part that got terrified of even a slight chance of me losing my kids. Like, they thought, what if it's like the typical thing where you get every other weekend? Or, I'm there every night. We lay in bed, we tell stories, so there's this moment every night that I'm with my kids. So I was really starting to panic, and I was really having a hard time. I sought out, a friend told me about a therapist in town, and that person shortly after told me about IFS. This person was just getting trained. gave me the introduction book or told me about it. And when I read the book, my whole system immediately soothed because I realized, oh, this anxious feeling, this terrified feeling of losing my kids is a part. It's not all of me. And in that moment, I was able to handle, okay, I could do this. And then
by just recognizing it's a part, by just saying it's a part. Wow.
And
it's
then,
not all of me.
Right. And then shortly thereafter, I was like, this IFS stuff is really cool. I wonder, I had professional development money from the company I worked with because we were national consultants, and they gave a bunch of money. It was really great at the time to get classes and to develop yourself. And I thought, I wonder if this IFS has a conference. And it must have been like early September. I looked and there was one in October in Chicago, like 5 hours away from me. And I applied for my organization. They said, sure. I'm like, I could, because we have a lot of social emotional initiatives with young children and Head Start. And I'm like, well, this will help me, build social emotional content for me. I went there and I was, Paul Ginter, who ended up being my level 1 trainer, and Dick Schwartz was also my level 1 trainer because he did week 2 of my retreat, which was amazing.
Yeah.
He did like my introduction, and then we were in a session and we were externalizing parts, like we were acting out parts. So at the beginning, the presenter said, okay, we need some people to be like protector parts, manager parts, some people to be firefighter parts, like the ones that come in that makes us drink and smoke and shop and do things when we're feeling upset. We need someone to be exiles, our fragile young parts. We need somebody to be self. And somehow it just landed on me that I was going to be self. So I sat in this chair and he's asking me to act out what would self do as all these people show up. And all I knew at that time was like responsive caregiving for infants and toddlers and, attachment, parenting. So I just essentially said, I'm just going to witness. I'm going to be here. I'm going to reflect back what I see. I'm going to see your need, not just what you're saying. And I'm going to tell you that I see your need. I'm going to respond to your need. And essentially that's what self is and self does. And in the middle of that, Dick Schwartz walks in and sits down and starts observing. And I'm like, I honestly thought, oh my God, Yoda is here. We're all fans, right? So
yeah,
she's here. And then all of a sudden he stands up and walks over and sits on the floor at my feet. Like I'm in this chair. And he says, I don't want to say exactly, but he basically said, I'm at this part. It was an exile. I'm an exile. And he starts telling me the story. And I just held space with him and reflected back and, oh, you must be feeling this. And at one point I got stuck and I just said, would you like a hug? And he just kind of nodded and I gave him a hug. And then all the other people lined up, like all the managers and firefighters, they all wanted to hug self. And there was this moment. And for me, it just blew me away. Like, that's what this is. The self is just like this infinite, loving being that is simply there, witnessing, understanding. Like, there's nothing you can bring that's going to make me walk away from you. Like, I'm here no matter what you bring, no matter who you are, what you are, how scary you are, or whatever. It just stuck with me. And then when I went back, I met Tanis Allen, who's one of the therapists in town here. She's like the mother hen of the IFS people here and helps us all. And she said, you should just take the training. And when I did, I looked for a retreat style because I kind of like immersion learning. And I see Paul Ginter week 1 in Toronto, Dick Schwartz week 2 in St. Louis. I'm like, Dick Schwartz, I'm doing it. Signed up, and when Dick taught our week, it was just, well, Paul's brilliant, first of all. And then, Dick really just took us so far. And he would even say, I normally wait till level 3 to talk about this. But, so I really felt like I got such a depth of the IFS teaching, being with him for a solid week in that role, witnessing demos and discussions. I mean, there were times where we would do self-energy exercises where I just felt like my hands were like so charged that I could like almost shoot sparks out of my hands. It was just amazing experience, amazing insight to myself and to my part. And then I went back to my normal life and applied it in my, consultation with Head Start programs, applied it I did that for many years, and then I was a head of a school for 3 years, of a Montessori school, and I applied it best I can there. And again, it felt, all of these situations kept feeling like I could do about 80% of my power, and I did fine. Or it felt like the school, like I thought this is what I wanted to do, but it's not a perfect fit for me. And then when I finally stopped that, I thought I should just try being an IFS practitioner. And I basically put on a website, rented an office for one day. Once one day was full, I added another day. Now I'm almost at my 2-year mark, and I'm almost like, okay, do I add? Right now I don't work Fridays because I believe in self-care. Like, should I add Fridays, or should I just get my waiting list started? And now I'm going next 2 weeks from now, I'm going to level 2, the IFIO, which is the intimacy from the inside out, to work with couples. Now I feel like I'm using my full potential. And I even debate, because I have this PhD in organization management, to also start working with organizational leaders. So going back to organizational leaders, if leaders could be in self at meetings, they're going to be curious about people's ideas. So a lot of times this is what happens in meetings. A leader comes in with a pre-designed idea. This is where I want us to go. And even though they say, I want you to brainstorm, they're secretly saying, I'm going to drag you guys over to this idea. But if you're in self, you might say, okay, a part of me thinks this is the best way to go, but I really want to be open and curious. It's going to hold space for the team to really feel safe, because creativity, if you look at the creativity research, people can't be creative in organizations if there's not a level of safety. Because if I share my idea and I get shot down, if I share my idea and I get backlash from colleagues, I'm just going to stop. And if I'm in a fight or flight kind of response, or like protective parts are up, there's no room for creativity. So for the leader's job is almost to be like self, and to create hold space for people to feel safe enough to say, let me explore our creativity. Because honestly, nowadays we need high-end innovation for companies to thrive, right? To try things that's never been tried before. And when I studied leadership, it was like this parallel thing. Like I was getting my IFS training as I was finishing my doctorate degree, studying leadership, and I'm studying self-leadership in IFS and leadership theory at a doctorate level. And I'm just like, whoa, this is so cool. So it's really, even modern leadership theory is about inspiring people. Like a true leader has a vision of where we can go, and leadership is nothing without followership. So if I'm stepping forward, if nobody follows, it's like that's on their own will. They have to want to follow. Managing is like from behind, pushing people, contracting. I'm going to pay you if you do what I want. Leadership is ideally even creating a shared vision. Like we all agree this is where we want to go, and people trust in you. Like I just watched Game of Thrones. There's certain leaders that people do out of fear. They follow them out of fear. And there's certain leaders that people say, you have such integrity that we know, even when no one's watching, you're going to do what's best for the organization because you care about us.
I have 2 questions. One is, if you find that so someone who's listening who works in an environment where they feel like their managers are often, they're in that position where they don't have voice, their managers are pushing them, how do they have more self in the midst of an organization like that?
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, we start with ourselves, right? So if I'm going into a meeting, I might notice I have a protector part coming up. Like I have a part that says, when you go in this meeting, you need to be invisible. Because if you're invisible, you're not going to get hurt. You're not going to get fired. You're not going to get yelled at. You're not going to get dismissed. So some people are sitting there invisible. Some people say, no, I have a part that says, I could really show my boss that I believe what he or she believes. They'll like me and they'll want me to be promoted. And so I'm going to basically be a cheerleader for your ideas. And that's a protector. Another person might be, or it might be I'm so anxious that I'm just gonna like nod my head. So people come in with these parts, which are really helpful. Like, and I want listeners to know, like, parts are not bad.
Right.
Parts are helpful. All parts have good intentions. They're trying to protect me from getting hurt. And the problem is when parts are leading the show, they're not as skilled and wise as self, and they might be making decisions that are not as mature as self would. And they might be short-sighted than what self can see. So if there's a chance to glimpse or to do a U-turn and to bring more self energy, you might be more resilient because the things your manager says, you might be more curious about their parts. Like, oh, this person probably feels a lot of pressure from upper management. Like I've been hearing like upper management's been really coming down on this person, and like I'm just going to notice that this person is really stressed about this meeting. So it might give me a little more compassion towards this person, and it might even, like, there is some leadership theory around relationship building. Like, when you have a relationship with your manager, they're more likely to trust your ideas and to give you opportunities. And that can come from the manager or from the employee. So you could start to build a relationship with that person and say, hey, I can, that was a stressful meeting, huh? Or like, hey, what like, how's things going with your kids? Or just to say, like, we're people here, right? And then the manager may be open when there's that trust to hear, like, hey, I have some thoughts. Like, you wouldn't share that until you have this relationship where it feels trusting, right? But I might say, sometimes I can tell the team, has been feeling a lot of stress in meetings. Like, yeah, I'm just wondering if you'd be open to hearing some thoughts, but that doesn't happen without relationship.
I was
And
just thinking that that's the same thing with our parts, right? Like if parts don't have relationship, when I first started doing this, I kept hearing my parts say to self, like, where have you been? If parts in self don't have a relationship, then, our parts aren't going to be able to relax or settle or give space for self to emerge. And so it's the same thing externally, that if I don't have a relationship with my manager, then how are the manager's parts going to relax in order to hear my ideas or let there be some creativity or whatever?
right, and I can tell you from being a head of a school, when they say lonely at the top, it really is, because you feel like, even like when you become a manager, people have, what I mentioned before, implicit theories about managers. So every manager they've had in the past all of a sudden gets slapped on top of you. So when I become a manager, if I'm a new guy coming in, they're like, oh, he's just like everybody else. He's going to say mean things. He's going to hurt us. You can't trust him. You can't tell him things. He's going to hurt me. Whatever has happened, right? But then I'm experiencing that kind of energy, and my parts are freaking out. Like, this person doesn't trust me. So managers are not these superhumans that are immune to human interaction. So when they see people not trusting, and they see people scared, or they see people kind of blocking, they have their own parts that are freaking out. Yeah, when we're in connection with ourself and we're able to say, oh, what parts do I have around this manager? If it's, again, before, parts beget parts, self begets self. So if I can be in self, there's a higher likelihood the manager will also drop their defenses and drop their needing to control part, their needing to look a certain way parts, and say, wow, maybe this person I could connect with, because it's pretty lonely up here. Like, maybe this is one of my staff that will get me or support me, support my ideas, because they're like being human with me right now. Most people, once you're a manager, they treat you differently. They treat you like you're not another human. They treat you like you have something of power, and you should be feared. You should be, like, I'm not that guy, but they just don't believe you. I mean, I guess over time, if you could be in self, they will believe you. And then as a leadership, you can build that sense of trust and that camaraderie. Like we said before, in the routines of work, that again and again, I'm trustworthy. I'm looking out for you. I'm looking out for our organization. I fess up when I make mistakes. I own it. I do repair when I'm having a bad day and I snap at somebody. I'm not immune to all of these things, just like you're not immune. That builds integrity, and integrity is one of the cornerstones of leadership. Like if you don't have integrity, you're not going to be followed.
I was thinking about what you said earlier about, if I'm the CEO, there's a part of me that feels like I have to have all the answers. And so then I have this defensive, I have to know everything. I have to have all the answers. And that's that's the part that's leading. Then that's going to trigger the parts in other people that are like, no thanks, don't trust you, don't like you. And then, they're going to do this. And the more they do, I'm sort of pushing my hand away right now. So the more I'm feeling pushed away, the more that CEO probably feels like they have to kind of rise above that. And then I have to know all the sort of, and then, right. Like, so then we just get more entrenched in our parts. Like
Exactly.
the employee gets more entrenched in the, I don't trust you. And the CEO gets more entrenched in the, I have to know all the answers and I'm not going to allow voice.
Or force you to follow me now. And if you're not going to trust me, well, then guess what? I'm the leader.
Right.
Do it or get out.
Right. Too bad, so sad.
So, I mean, I'm not saying all CEOs are that way, so I don't mean
Sure.
to be biased but there is a stereotype that fulfills that role. I mean, like there's enough people that are like that to satisfy why we have stereotypes. Yeah, I think you nailed it, that it becomes a parts, I don't want to call it war, but like a parts against parts. Just like when you see couples come in, they're at the place of there's a part talking to a part, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
Until you have these moments where there's like a self, and that's when you see them like they're both like sitting on opposite ends of the couch or whatever, and then there's this moment where you kind of help each other be soft towards each other's parts, and then they look at each other and you see that loving gaze at each other, and like, this is why I'm doing the work, like you see that moment, and you're like, yeah, let's remind ourselves what it's like to be self to self when you trust each other.
Right.
And the same thing at work. And then Brene Brown is just popping in like on my shoulder. You trust people, don't trust people who aren't trustworthy, right? Like you have this circle of people to trust. So I'm not suggesting just trust everybody, but you could build relationships with your boss. You can build relationships with your staff where you can build trust. And trust drives, like if you look at Erickson, psychosocial stages of development, trust is the engine to the train of all other things. Like with trust, you can take initiative, you can have autonomy, you can be industrious. But the minute you lose trust, then it's not safe to step out. It's not safe to try new things. And really, the leadership role is to create organizational safety. Like the climate of psychological safety is how it's said in the literature. And that allows creativity, that allows innovation, that allows people to be themselves. And I mean, diversity of thought and diverse people in general is beautiful and helpful to organizations, and diverse thought, like to have people who believe in different things. It's kind of like, I guess I keep relating to Game of Thrones because I've been watching the whole series again, but they have the king or queen's hand, the person who's supposed to check them. This is a trusted person who will say, I think you're not looking at this part of it. I think you're not seeing this, to help you go, oh, a friend of mine once said, you don't know where you're standing because your feet are in the way. That's why you need friends and family to tell you. We need to have trusted advisors when we're at top level management to say, hey, Seth, you are completely blind to this whole piece here. Like the staff is all like, why isn't he seeing this? And I'm here to tell you, this is what they want you to see. And I should, if I'm in self, I will be like, thank you so much. You just saved me. Now we can make a decision that's actually helpful for the organization. But if I was in a part that said, oh, you're telling me I'm not good enough and the people don't like me, now you're telling me people are revolting against me, I might have a part that fights back. Oh, I'm going to create this new rule that everybody has to blank, retaliation. It's just creating an environment where I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you. I'm open. And another thing about, if leaders are listening to us going, yeah, that doesn't work, because if I listen to everybody's idea, there'd be chaos. That's true. So a climate of openness from the research really is defined as you hear the ideas and you try some of them some of the time. If you can do some of them some of the time and people see some people's ideas actually being rolled out, there's a collective feeling of, oh, this person's open to our ideas. If they're always shut down, it's just not. And if you always accept everybody's ideas, then they think you don't even know what you're doing because you're just riding whatever wave comes through, and there is a lack of trust. And I was guilty of that as a head of school because I was like, oh, I should really be open. And I tried different things, and I think people were like, that was one of my things I had to work on myself, was just to say, oh, wait. I need not just be trying to make people feel heard and listened to by trying everything, because that just creates chaos.
Right.
So it's not an easy job, and I feel for managers and leaders because it's a really hard job. And if people underneath them could say, wow, this is a person too with parts. This is a person who has exiles that might be scared, or might be feeling like people don't like them, or might be feeling unworthy of love. And I could look at them also through that lens, that, creating relationship and trust organization is top down, but it's also bottom up. It's leading upwards with creating a place of safety for my manager. And that's something for me, I've always just done that naturally because it felt right. Like, I'm going to go beyond your role here, and I'm just going to be a person with you. Like Dick Schwartz is a great example. He's somebody who, when you talk to him, he doesn't act like I'm the all-powerful being and you should be bowing at my feet, like I'm the ultimate guru. He is the most personable person on the planet. And he'll even admit, oh, I have parts with my wife, or I have parts. And he's just a very humble person, and it allows you to feel like, okay, we can relate on a human level here, and I ultimately respect you for everything you've done. And when you talk, I really want to listen. When other leaders kind of put out this air, put their parts out there, like I'm someone to be respected, I'm beyond you. There's parts of you. We all have part sniffers, and they notice, like, oh, what the heck is that? There's something that just doesn't feel right in my stomach right now with this person. Like, it's starting to feel like a cult, or it's starting to feel like something else. And then you put up your protectors, and then you can't even learn what this person is saying. So one thing I love about Dick is he creates a safe climate just from his being, because he's himself most of the time when he's teaching and training. You can just feel it. You can tell when he's not, just like all of us. But I just give him credit for that he's a great model for how to lead and how to help people come together around an idea.
Well, I was thinking as you talk, so isn't there a saying about protectors, that protectors often draw to themselves the things that they're afraid of? So like a leader is so afraid that people aren't listening, he or she might act like everyone has to listen to me all the time. And so I'm going to talk down to you. People actually then don't listen to them because of the way they treat people.
I think basically what you're describing is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So if I think that my staff don't trust me, and that part takes me over, even if I'm not outwardly doing things, I'm subtly behaving in ways that assume you don't trust me. And when their parts notice that, they're going to think, he's not authentic, I don't trust him. Right? So I just created this situation by leading with a defense of lack of trust. Like if you walk up, I've done it before where, I have parts that, for my deepest core exiles is around needing like unconditional love and presence and attachment, and I think I still have parts that worry my kids won't love me, and things like that. So if I lead with that, like if I even unconsciously, like there's a part there, like you need to show me you love, like they will be annoyed, they'll be frustrated because I'm acting like kind of needy, right?
Yeah.
So their parts are like, this part is coming at me with this like intense need, and it's like freaking me out.
Yeah.
And so if I could just be more in self with them, they feel loved and relax, and they feel seen, and then they reciprocate. And that's one thing I like to say with leadership and with parenting, that we are in a power position parenting, and you are in a power position with leadership. And I think it's our responsibility to initiate self, not wait for them. right? So when our kids are freaking out and we're like, why aren't you calm? I need you to be calm. I need you to be relaxed. I need you to listen. I need you to sit there and eat your dinner. It's like we're freaking out, and to ask them to do something we're not doing, right? And if we could bring that, then they'll reciprocate. And the same in the workplace. We can't ask our staff to like blindly accept and kind of just follow you with passion if we're not in self, because we're not inspiring that. So, we should say we're in a leadership role. We have a responsibility to get to know our parts and to be as in self as much as possible with our staff. And as a parent, I have the responsibility to be in self as much as I possibly can with my kids. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. That doesn't take away my responsibility to do that. And the minute I think I'm immune from that is when we start having relationship problems. I guess the only last thing I would say is when we're in self, when we talked about the different glasses. So I think when we're in a part, it's almost like we're down in the weeds level. Like we can only see what's right in front of us. And self has a more of a global, or like almost like if you could rise above and you could see the landscape, like you have a better perspective of everything. So I think oftentimes when we are stressed and we have a lot of anxiety over being overwhelmed, trying to make dinner and everything else, or we're overwhelmed because of all of our meetings, it's kind of noticing that we're really like down in the weeds and stuck. And that if we could, an advantage being in self is that we actually get more perspective. So that's where some of that wisdom, I think, comes in, that, like, okay, I'm stuck here making dinner and I'm freaking out. But if I could just get a little space from that and get in self, it's like, oh yeah, of course I'm freaking out. Like, it's been a long day. But what's important here? My important thing is that we have a wonderful dinner with our family. So I'm just going to like take some deep breaths and be like, okay, dinner's going to be late. And it's more important that we have a good dinner, because otherwise I'm going to be so stressed out to get dinner on the table and have a wonderful dinner that by the time it's on the table, I've already spoiled it and the kids are pissed at me.
Yeah, what I'm getting there is also that expanding. You're also doing connecting in the routine, which is what you've been talking about.
Yeah. So this kind of just noticing, am I in the weeds or am I actually kind of in a global view? Am I able to see, at a 10-foot, 20-foot level? That was just something else I had down that I think is important for parenting and for leadership. And just know that if there's parts that are worried about, can I do a good job, whether it's parenting or leadership, being in self brings natural wisdom. So there might not be a formula for how to be a perfect parent or to be a perfect leader, but just like with situational leadership, you observe what's right in front of you and you decide what to do based on what you see. And if you're in self, you'll have a way more clear vision of how to respond. And if you could respond to each little moment in a compassionate, clear, patient, courageous, curious way, in the end, everything does kind of run really smoothly throughout your day.
I love the parallels that just feel very organic and natural between these two things, the parenting and leadership. And it's so cool because it sounds like that's what your life is, right? You had this life of teaching and parenting and being with kids, and then you had this other life of being in leadership and business model stuff, and then IFS is kind of like put it all together for you so beautifully.
Thank you. That's exactly, I like how you said that. That really does fit. Thank you.
So Seth, if you weren't an IFS practitioner, what would you be doing instead?
I've been thinking about that question. It's really hard because I love this work so much. I feel like this really feels like what I'm meant to do. Part of my mission and vision of the work is to repair the world, and I believe by working with people one at a time, it's like my way to, if I can help people find self and help people, live more presently with their family and with others, I'm spreading a healing. So it's really hard for me to say I wouldn't do this. I don't think I ever would not do this work. But I think if I could have enough time to do more, I love being in a creative space. Like I used to make jewelry. I like to work with wood. So I could see myself, being some crazy wild artist at art shows and things like that. And my wife and I sometimes joke about like, retrofitting an old school bus and just touring around for our retirement. I could be like doing IFS sessions online and, having art at a art fair. And so for me, it's just like, to me, that just feels like really engaging in life, in self. Yeah, and I really love teaching. So doing workshops and inspiring people to do this work.
Well, I like the idea of you being in a hippie bus, travel with a computer, so you could do Zoom sessions or stop at Starbucks, and your hippie bus pulls up into Starbucks, and you do Zoom sessions, and then you go to the local craft fair, and then you're engaging with people all day and talking to people and having relationships. And there's probably other artists that you've met, and you all travel together. That sounds so fun.
Yeah. I've also thought, wouldn't it be great to have like IFS communes where we all live and we buy land and we put tiny houses. We have a communal house and we basically live, we do our whatever we need to do to help each other survive. Like some people farm, some people make clothes, whatever. But to live in kind of like an IFS way where we're in self together and we negotiate conflict using IFS. And like when you go to a week-long retreat, the relationships that you build are so amazing. Like you just, the amount of self-energy in the room gets so concentrated that you almost feel like what's possible with humans, like the type of community that can happen. I think what we're all yearning for when we have so much unrest right now around polarities. And to me, that's what my system has always craved is that sense of community and art and togetherness and kind of hippie role. But I think we all want that. I think we all want to really feel the connection.
Yeah, we want that internal experience, and we want our outer world would feed that. Like there would be a loop between my outer world would look like my inner world. And so if my inner world looks that calm and compassionate, I want my outer world to look like that.
Right.
And then the more like you talked about the external constraints, the more my outer world looks, calm and clean and, not chaotic. And then the more that's going to feed into what's happening inside.
Yeah. And just to model how one would use IFS on themselves, as I'm saying this, I'm also realizing, that's that part that I told you about earlier that craves attachment and connection. So that part really wants that kind of community. That part really, well, self does too, and self just sits in that. But when you feel like this real yearning and almost like I have to have it, then like, okay, there's something there. That's more than that. There's like an agenda that, okay, that part, I need to give that part some more attention because it's just right now, it's just kind of speaking out that it really needs, it craves that kind of connection because it maybe didn't have it when I was little.
Yeah. Do you want to give that part some attention right now?
Well, I can do it after.
Take a minute.
And
okay.
I think just by recognizing it right now, I think it feels it, and it feels like I can sense the ease. Like it's just kind of, thank you for speaking for me. And
yeah. And what a great model. Like, thank you for role modeling that for us, right? Because when I feel something really intensely, even if it's something good, like the need for attachment, the need for love, the need for community, but I was feeling that with such intensity, wait, that must be a part right there. Okay, let me check inside and see, who's up and who needs some attention.
Right. Because other people might go, that's not how I form connection. That wouldn't be right for me. So it's not like there's this global truth that you have to have this community. Like that's what that part of me needs. That's what I might need, but it might not be. So I also in self would say, there's many ways to connect, and there's many ways to make that happen, not just this one vision of the school bus.
The hippie bus. And so what are you up to? You mentioned workshops. Are you doing any workshops? Like tell everybody what you're up to and how they can contact you.
Yeah. So mostly right now I'm seeing individual clients. A lot of people are coming to me now with parenting needs. So they want to form better relationships with their kids. They want to have more ease and flow with their kids. So they're coming to me. I started the IFS self-led parenting Facebook page, which is where a lot of those folks come from. And I also started the IFS practitioner page, which is a page for people that are not therapists doing the work, because so often we're like a sub community of IFS that it'd be nice if we have questions for each other. And that page hasn't really gotten too active yet, but for the parenting is really key. Again, I'm going to the IFIO, which is intimacy from the inside out. So I do work with couples, but I really want to expand my knowledge base of how to do that most effectively. And I've got, because of my education background, the IFS, the Foundation for Self-Leadership, is a separate entity than the Center for Self-Leadership. So the Center for Self-Leadership, for those who don't know, is the organization that really sets up all the trainings and all the professional development and all the certification, and they house all of that. And then the foundation is a nonprofit organization that's trying to spread IFS through the world, through schools, through prisons, through underserved populations in general. And I've somehow been linked into that, where there's a whole group around schools, and I've become an official advisor to the education management team who are trying to get education in school. So they just pick my brain, we have dialogue. And also there's a Twitter account with the foundation. I'm one of a group of people. They just put out, if they think the tweet might not land well with people or they're not sure, they'll send it out to us. We'll look at it and go, oh yeah, it might be good to shift the language this way, or that might be triggering for people. How about if we say it this way? So we're just kind of like as we all need an editor to help us. We know what we want to say, but is this going to say what I think it's saying?
Right.
So that's really exciting. And I haven't done a workshop in a while, but I have done the workshops I've done have been around talking four-part with partners, with each other, because I think how IFS shows up in the world in our daily life and routines really has to be, for me, noticing our parts, speaking for our parts instead of being blended with our parts. Like to say, I have a part that's getting frustrated right now. I have a part that feels like getting stressed because I'm late, instead of I'm running late, I gotta go. So instead of letting the part take over, I'm talking for it. But I'm really thinking of expanding for parenting and couples work. But right now, probably the best way to find me is just my first and last name.com. This is my website. So Seth Kopald, Kopald.com. On my page, if somebody wanted to have a session with me, I offer one free exploratory session. It's a 60-minute, either face-to-face or Zoom, where essentially I get to know you. I usually try to, the last half hour, do almost some IFS work, if somebody, especially when that's what they're looking for. So really, it's a chance for your parts to check me out and say, does this feel right, with no strings attached. So it's not like this is your first session free and we're scheduling sessions. It's this is purely for you to kick the tires and see. And I found, from a marketing perspective, it's really helpful, because people's parts are I have to choose one person.
Yeah.
How do I know? Okay, I'm just going to read the bio and choose this person, and then they're stuck with that person, and they have to almost break up with them,
Yes.
to get a different IFS practitioner. So for me, it's this is almost we get to hang out and you get to know me. And if you want to schedule, let's talk about that. But if you don't, that's okay, and it's free. And I find that it's really helpful. And I hope to do more work with couples and couples workshops, and doing some writing, and hoping to get some writing out there at some point.
Great. Yeah. Anything else you want listeners to know?
I guess the first thing that came up is love is really all we need. Because I think about what it's really and this might sound corny, but self is all we need, really, because what is love? Love to me is deep understanding. When you really love somebody or something, you're willing to go there. You're willing to meet them where they are. And being in self really means I'm willing to open myself to you, to each other, to everything. I could still hold my core beliefs, but I'm not going to stomp on people to get there. I'm not going to push people away. I'm going to feel more confident in myself. So really, everybody's grappling with, how do I live more fully and more presence? And for me personally, IFS is helps me, because if I can get into self, it's all right there. It already is like Dick Short says, it's a kitchen that never runs out of food. You keep opening the refrigerator and it refills. Like it can never run out. So some people say, I don't know if I have enough self. I don't think I have. Like everybody has a boundless, and I think it's like what ties us together. It's like some people, if you're not a spiritual or religious person, it might be the life force that ties us together. If you're like a spiritual person, you might say, oh, it's kind of the universal energy or it's earth energy. If you're a religious person, you could say it's the godliness in all of us that, that ties us together. So, but for me, it's almost like if we want to make life simple, it's like strive as much as possible, being self as much as possible, and life tends to go well.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Seth.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is like a real honor. I saw the other folks you did, and to be in the same list as some of those other highly respected people. I just wanted to really thank you for including me and giving me this chance to share.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.